What's up, YouTube? Today we're doing a boss fight brawler ranking list. I'm going to give you the top 10 bosses in boss fight, and then also the top 10 brawlers at killing bosses. So let's get into it. Alright, so it is boss fight weekend, so let's do a boss fight brawler ranking list. Now, I don't want to go over every single brawler. I just want to go over the top 10 best bosses, and then after that we'll go over the top 10 brawlers at killing bosses. As after all, you may want to be the boss the most, but most of the time you're not gonna be the boss. But let's start out with the most favorite fun part, the best bosses in Brawl Stars. We're gonna start out at number 10. Now, of course, there are two maps for boss fight, Calamity Canyon and Hall of the Mole King. Hall of the Mole King tends to favor tanks. It's a smaller map, there's a lot of grass, and it's sort of open. Calamity Canyon tends to favor throwers. It's definitely a much bigger map. Okay, now into the ranking. At number 10, we have Daryl. Daryl's actually not that bad of a boss. Pretty good on Hall of the Mole King, and his super is definitely really viable in boss fight because it allows him to escape all the way across the map, away from most of the enemies. Maybe he ends up getting closer to one of them who just spawned, but either way, his super allows him to escape a lot of dangerous situations, especially if you have a star power as well, and it just really allows Daryl to buy time. He's not an amazing boss, but he's pretty good. At number 9, we have Dynamite. Dynamite does definitely shine on Calamity Canyon. He struggles a little bit on Hall of the Mole King, though. Dynamite, you would think, would be a really amazing boss, but in a 1 versus 5 situation, Dynamite doesn't have the largest area to be able to consistently hit enough shots to kill people's numbers. Now, his super is amazing in boss fight, and that's really, really good. So he's a really good option on Calamity Canyon. He tends to struggle a little bit on Hall of the Mole King. He can struggle to finish off brawlers, especially tanks. Tanks can really cause Dynamite problems, but Dynamite is overall a good boss brawler. Now, number 8, we have Tara. Tara is definitely a good boss. She's able to hit multiple brawlers at once. Her super is a bit of an area super. It doesn't deal a ton of damage, but it does decent. And then it also, if you have her star power, it spawns a high health shadow figure that can attack other enemies and distract them at the least. Tara as a boss, definitely pretty viable and pretty decent on both maps. Not super amazing. Now, at number 7, we have Crow. Crow is a solid boss, able to deal decent damage overall, really fast reload speed, and it allows him to keep people poisoned. He doesn't have to be super aggressive, but if someone is close range to him, he can deal a good amount of damage point blank, and then also he has the ability to jump away on top of him already having a really fast move speed. So he's able to have a really good maneuver ability, and that's one of the main reasons Crow is a pretty good boss. It's mostly his maneuver ability, not so much his damage, even though he can deal a decent amount of damage. Now, number 6, we have Barley. Barley a little bit better than Dynamite in my opinion, just because he's able to be more consistent with his shots. So he can consistently and also hit more enemies at the same time, especially with his super as well. It can be really hard to dodge. He can put a lot of pressure out. He's really good on Calamity Canyon. He's okay on Hall of the Mole King. Definitely can't underrate Barley though. Number 5, we have Shelly. Shelly's a really strong brawler in general right now, and in boss fight, it's no exception. On Hall of the Mole King, she's really good. She counters all the tanks really well, and her super can hit multiple people. It can stun them, and it can slow them down if you have her star power as well. So Shelly can be a really viable option. She's not super amazing on any of the maps except Hall of the Mole King, but she tends to be hard to deal with no matter what sort of enemy team comp you're facing, as long as you're Shelly. Now, number 4, we have one of the best brawlers in the game in general. It's going to be Spike. Spike is just really consistently solid on both maps, even both Calamity Canyon and Hall of the Mole King. Spike is really solid. His ability for his super allows him to hit multiple brawlers, slow them down, allows him to either escape or deal a lot of damage, and his main attack does a good amount of damage, and since it branches out and there's so many people, he can often get a lot of damage. He can tend to chain supers a little bit, not maybe chaining, but getting them pretty fast. Spike can deal a lot of damage, and he can shoot around walls as well. He just tends to be a very balanced boss. Now, number 3, we have arguably the fastest brawler in the game combined with his attack. It's going to be Mortis. Mortis is a pretty good boss. I mean, he's good on both maps, and it's mostly just because of his maneuver ability. He's able to run around the map Now, yes, you can pick up souls with his star power as well, but healing is reduced by 1/5 in boss fights, so that's not really a big factor for Mortis. It's mostly that he can just dash around, get a kill here and there if he needs to, and then he can just keep away from enemies consistently, and it tends to be able to get a really decent time very often, and not going to get a really bad time with Mortis as the boss. Now, he's not great first boss, so got to keep that in mind, but he is a good boss. Now, these top 2 brawlers for bosses are going to be spawners. At number 2, we have Jessie. At number 1, we have Nita. Spawners are really, really strong in boss fight because the character they spawn just has so much more health and it has more damage. It just makes it so hard to deal with, and those things end up getting them their next super pretty easily. So Jessie is my number 2 because she tends to be a little bit easier to deal with. But she's still really strong in general. If you don't have the right team comp facing the Jessie, it can be really hard to deal with. If you do, though, it tends to not be the biggest of problems, unlike Nita, where Nita, the bear, is just so annoying no matter what team comp you have. And then Nita's ability can also, she can constantly hit people, hit multiple at the same time, and sort of shoot around walls really well. Nita is just a really balanced boss, good on any of the maps. And her bear is just so hard to deal with. And it just, I mean, a 10,000 health bear is insane. All right, now we're going to get into my brawlers that are best at killing bosses in boss fight. At number 10, we have Daryl. Daryl's actually pretty decent, both as a boss and versus bosses, and part of that is because of his super. His super, when he's facing bosses, it allows him to get back in the action really quickly. Even if the boss escapes away, Daryl can super right to them, even if they're on the other side of the map. That can be really key in boss fight, especially in Calamity Canyon, where it can take a long time to just get back to the boss after you spawn. You can easily be out of the action for a good amount of time, but if you're Daryl, you can come back and super in. And then in general, as a tank, he does good damage, and he can help tank the boss shots for his allies while he's going in and dealing damage and then getting his super. Now, number 9 is going to be a really similar brawler. It's going to be Bull. Bull's similar ability. His super allows him to get back into the action sooner. It also breaks down walls, so if there's anything in the way, that's not a problem. Also, it can stun the enemy a little bit easier to aim because you're not just using it to get close to the enemy. And then also, he tends to get, low fairly easily. Boss does a lot of damage, so his star power is definitely pretty useful in boss fights. So he can end up doing a good amount of damage as a tank and in general. Now, number 8, we have Tara. Tara, one of the main reasons she's pretty good versus bosses is because of her super. Any sort of super or ability in boss fight that allows you to disrupt the boss and either stop them from moving, stun them, or slow them down can be really, really key, as it's 5-on-1. So if you can have any sort of moment where you can stop the boss, you can allow your teammates to super the boss, you can allow your teammates to charge up their super, you can allow them to just destroy the boss in those couple seconds. So that is exactly why Tara is pretty good in boss fight, just because of her super. On number 7, we have Barley. Barley's definitely pretty decent in boss fight. He's able to basically chip the enemy pretty often and stay alive a lot of the times, unless he's facing a thrower. But otherwise, Brawler can just keep damaging the boss from a distance and behind walls and not be in too much of a trouble. And then if any sort of ally around him is able to stun the boss or slow down the boss, he can use his super in a small area and deal a lot of damage, potentially. Not always, sometimes you are not able to always hit that, but Barley has good potential in boss fight. Now, number 6, we have Colt. Colt can deal a lot of damage versus boss. Obviously, that's his best attribute, is be able to deal damage. But on top of that, he's also able to break down walls. So if there's any sort of situation, maybe it's Calamity Canyon, you need to break down some of those walls because you're facing an enemy boss thrower. Colt is your guy for that. He can definitely do that. Colt, now, he's not super amazing in my opinion, but he's really solid because he can stay away from a distance and constantly deal damage. He's maybe not going to be dealing the most damage, but he's going to be dealing a good amount, and he's going to be staying alive for the most part. Now, number 5, I have Ricochet. Ricochet, another really high damage hero brawler. I have him a little bit better than Colt because in boss fight, I find the boss tends to move around a lot, and just that Ricochet shots tend to be a little faster if you can bounce them off walls. And there's a lot of angles and corners where you're not always sure where the boss is going, and Ricochet is really good at just going around any sort of hard angle where the boss is trying to hide, and you don't want to get too close to the boss because if you do, he's going to destroy you. So Ricochet can keep his distance a little bit better, be behind those walls, and still get hits. That's why Ricochet can be really good in boss fight, and as well, that works especially well with his super. Now, number 4, I have Dynamite. Dynamite, as a thrower, can stay away from the boss behind walls and deal consistent damage. But on top of that, his super does, again, pretty good damage, but it disrupts the boss, which, as I said, can be very, very important in boss fight. Now, not only can that stop the boss from moving for a small time, but it can also, if the boss is, for instance, you think the boss is about to use their super, it might depend on what boss it is, like a crow, that's not going to work, but it can stop them from doing that and also allow your teammates to come attack the boss a little easier. Now, number 3, I have Spike. Spike a little bit better than Dynamite, able to deal consistently more damage, but his super is a little bit easier to not miss. And he can also, I feel like Spike gets his super pretty often in boss fight because he's able to stay around and hit around walls and do not get too close to the boss. Now, he does have low health, but you can also use his star power with his super to stay alive as well. And you can easily slow down the boss, which is, as I mentioned, very, very key in boss fight. And it allows your enemies to either get their super a little bit easier or use their super more effectively, like a Barley. If you slow down that boss in your Spike super, that Barley can then have a smaller super radius on the boss and deal even more damage. Now, number 2, the second best brawler at killing bosses is going to be Shelly. Shelly is really, really good versus bosses. Just has the ability to really destroy bosses. If you have a situation as a Shelly where you have your super and you have a lot of health and you get right next to a boss, oh boy, watch out for that boss, because you can have situations where you are just chaining supers as Shelly, where you're disrupting the boss and you deal full damage with your super and you get most of it back from that. Then you just do one more shot and then you can easily get another super again. You can just keep doing that and just supering the boss, get 3 or 4 or 5 supers on the boss, and just not only are you disrupting them, stopping them from moving, but you're going to deal a lot of damage. And Shelly is just really hard to deal with as a boss with her super, especially if you also have her star power, because not only are you disrupting them, but you're also slowing them down for a little bit as well. Now, number 1, the best brawler at killing bosses in boss fight, if you haven't figured it out, it's going to be Frank. Frank and his super is just so strong versus bosses. The strongest stun in the game makes him the best at killing bosses in the game. And on top of that, it only takes him 3 hits, including hitting with his super, to charge up his next super. So you can easily stun the boss, hit them twice, and then maybe they'll get 1 hit on you, but you can stun them again right away. So Frank can be really, really good versus bosses. And if you have 2 Franks on your team, you can technically, if you time it well, keep the boss stunned for an eternity until they are dead. So Frank is really, really amazing versus bosses. Having 2 Franks on your team is, oh god, it's so annoying to deal with if you are the boss. Frank is just so good at killing bosses in boss fight because of that stun, and that is why he is the best at killing bosses in Brawl Stars. Alright guys, that's going to be it for my boss fight ranking list. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what opinions you would do differently, what rankings you would do differently, how you guys are doing in boss fight this weekend. But guys, that's it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed the gameplay as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you later.